What is up, action takers? Woo! Lit here in the studio with Joe Rubin. He's the co-founder of Mowpod, and we are talking about how to grow your podcast through advertising. We're talking about how to run ads, who to run ads through. Joe's got a great business. He's growing huge shows, working with networks like the Oprah Winfrey Network, iHeart, and they use his service because what he does is you give him money and he runs ads and grows your podcast. We're going to be talking about some of the considerations, budgeting, and how you can run ads to grow your show. Really, really informative. I know you're going to love this. By the way, if you haven't yet, smash the subscribe button, leave a 5-star review. I appreciate you. It costs you nothing. It helps me a lot. I appreciate you. So with all that said, let's get into this episode. DJ, run the tape. Joe, what's up? Welcome to the show, brother.
Oh, thank you for having me, man.
Joe, it's a pleasure.
Good to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have a follow-up convo. We got to meet at PodFest, and I loved what you had to say. You know, I interviewed a lot of people. You were one of my favorite because I thought it was really relevant to me as a podcaster, me as a business owner, trying to grow my business through podcasting. So I'm kind of happy to get here and jam a little bit more and talk about Mowpod.
You're not just saying that because I'm on the podcast right now, are you? Was it a good conversation? Did you enjoy? Listen, one of your favorites.
you are on the podcast right now, so I don't just invite people on the podcast like, you know, if it's not. So I promise you, I'm not just saying that. I'm not just saying.
That's fine. No, you know what? It probably wouldn't have been a good way to start. Like, you know what? You were my least favorite conversation of the entire event, so I figured I had to bring you back.
We had to redeem the convo. Yeah,
it was so bad that I had to get this on tape.
No, nothing that bad. But I want to talk a little bit about the business. I'm big on podcasting. Yeah. You know, I think people are kind of sleeping on podcasting and the value not only that can bring to your business, but the actual business that you can build from a podcast. It's becoming the new big form of media. But I want to kind of go back in time to like before podcasting was big and cool. How did you come up with the idea for Mowpod?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. So we started our company focusing on newsletter growth. That's where we started out. So we worked with companies like Morning Brew and The Hustle, helping them grow their newsletter subscribers. And we started getting a lot of requests for podcasts with, hey, can you help us with our podcast? We have one of those. Do you do podcast growth? And we said, no, no, we don't do that. We just focus on newsletters. And we said no like 3 times. And by the 4th time we were asked to help with a podcast, we were like, all right, we got to figure this out. Like, we're missing something. Everybody keeps asking us, let's do this. So we were like, all right, let's help people use the same sort of techniques and practices that we're working with, and performance only, and that's how we get paid, and we'll help people grow their podcast. But we were like, we need to learn about podcasting. Like, we don't know much about it, really, not our forte here. So we started our own podcast. Called Friday Night Karaoke, actually, and it was a group that we started on Facebook over the pandemic. Quick backstory: obviously, everybody's locked at home. You can't go out, and we were like, my buddy Mike and I were like big on going out to karaoke and doing business events, and then let's go out to karaoke, sing a little bit, and then we missed it. So we were like, all right, let's do an online group on Facebook. We set it up. We started sort of singing to each other at first. Really, nobody was on it. We started bringing people on there, and then all of a sudden, people started getting on there. We made it a fun group, and that's what we based our podcast around. So almost every week, we record a podcast and choose a theme of the week, and one is 80s hair band music or country music or whatever, and then we do a podcast on there, and we learned about how to actually podcast before we got in there and tried to be in this business. So we wanted to get the ins and outs, wanted to see the technologies, we wanted to use the recordings, get the microphones right, figure out how to host it and what to do. And so once we started doing that, we started seeing if we could promote our own podcast. And that's what we started doing. So that was our first podcast that we promoted. And then we started saying to our customers, I think we can potentially help you out with your podcast. And it started taking off from there.
So did you find the growth strategies that you used to grow the podcast were very similar to the newsletter or completely different?
Oh, definitely different. It's same in some respects, different in others, right? The same we had to, put together ads. We had to get the ads out there. We had to find the right people, but definitely different. It's a different beast for sure, than somebody just entering in an email. This case, you are going in there and you're committing to listening to something for a while. You're getting in there and downloading a podcast. It's definitely a different beast.
Cool. Okay. Got it. So I want to talk about ads a little bit. I think when most people talk about how to grow your podcast, it's take clips and share them on social media and do this sort of thing.
Right.
The idea of ads is really interesting to me.
Yeah.
Because I find that it can be pretty expensive. I think you need to have a good offer on the back end. But so let's talk about advertisement. Right now, state of the game. What are you what are you looking at when it comes to running ads? You're talking Facebook ads. You're running ads on other podcasts. Are you putting up billboards in Times Square? What are you doing?
Definitely not the billboard in Times Square, but we do have a few things that we do. So we have a nice background in programmatic advertising. So we run most of our stuff through programmatic advertising using DSPs and SSPs, all the jargon that the ad folks use when they're advertising pretty much anything. We charge, but it is a lot of work, right? So like you mentioned, it could be costly, it could be a little less costly. We said, all right, let's make it a flat fee for download. That way we only charge on performance. We only charge if you get this IAB 2.0 countable download in your host. That's what we charge on. So it's up to us.
Can you explain that IAB countable download? What does that mean?
Sure. So it's got to be a certain amount of the podcast downloaded. It's got to be a non-duplicate IP address, right? They don't want the same person just downloading and listening to the same podcast all day long, right? So for you to sell, advertising in your podcast, your advertisers want to see, all right, how many downloads are you getting? And they don't want it to be, well, yeah, I just hit it on repeat and I download it all day long, every day on 10 different laptops in my living room. They want it to be legitimate people listening and to this podcast and so legitimate downloads. So that's the IAB, which is sort of the standards that are used for counting for in advertising, for making sure that people are getting what they're paying for in advertising.
Right. And so that's one of the things that I think is important on your side. Like, for example, I can, run ads on through Pandora or through Anchor or something like that. But, how do I know I'm actually getting the value from the target? It just seems like it's a bunch of smoke and mirrors. It's hard. It feels like it's hard to actually clarify or be certain that I'm getting the actual value back. How do you prove that to your clients? You see the IAD and whatnot. How do you show the value back to people that run ads with you?
Sure. So you have a hosting company for your podcast and you actually see these numbers in your host. So if we're running ads and we're getting millions of impressions and all these clicks and everything, and you're not seeing downloads in your hosting company, and if you work with Megaphone or whoever you're working with, if you're not seeing that, you're not paying us, right? So that's I'm not here to be like, oh yeah, well, we got you so many impressions, this billboard on Times Square, right? You know how many people saw it? Nobody gives a shit, right? Like if you're not seeing the impressions, if you're not seeing the downloads in your host, you're not paying us.
Yeah. One of the things that I noted on your website is you've partnered up with some pretty big networks here. The Gist, Oprah Winfrey's Network, Megaphone, iHeart Radio. So this is kind of like a two-part question. I'll start with the first part. How did you develop those relationships with these networks?
So
let's start there.
So to give you more of an answer on that one, it actually blows my mind that I work with some of these clients that we're working with. It really makes me, like, I take a step back sometimes and I'm like, holy shit, it's
pretty crazy.
It is really crazy. Like, I can't believe that like we're working with, and not only are we working with them, they like working with us. They love us. They're like, oh, this is great. Nice work. And we're like, holy shit, that's amazing. I'm so, it's exciting, Outreach. We have an amazing sales outreach. Mike, our CEO and our director of sales have just an extensive background in sales, and they kick ass at it. And they're persistent. They know how to find the right people using, LinkedIn or other tools like that. And they reach out persistently until they get the right person on the phone and hopefully, talk a good game and get them to continue talking with us and we do a small test. Like a lot of times, you get people who are like, oh, do a huge test, and because you're probably going to hate us, and at least I'll get some money, right? Like we're the exact opposite approach, right? We do a very small test just to get people comfortable with working with us, and if they love it, then they can then push in more chips and know what to expect.
So what does it look like for them, the network partnering up with you? They say, hey, Joe, we want to run ads through our podcast. I'm assuming like Oprah says, hey, I want to run ads on my podcast. You find people that want to run the ads on her podcast? That's the opposite. That's like companies like AdvertiseCast do that. Like that's the opposite side of what we do. We work with them on the growth side. So a podcast would come to us, or a network with podcasts would come to us and say, hey, we're launching a new podcast. We want to get the word out about our podcast. We're doing some Facebook ads. Yes, we are doing some audio swaps and putting it on other podcasts, but we want to get some advertising behind us, like anything. Like, so, any television show that you're watching on Netflix or anything, they advertise, right? They get the word out. So it's like, oh my goodness, this movie star is in this movie and it's going to be released. And I've been watching commercials on it and previews about it. And I can't wait to see it. It's going to be amazing. The Rock is in it. I gotta watch it. It's coming out in 3 weeks on Netflix, right? Like they advertise to get the word out about podcasts, about who's going to be in it, about how awesome it's going to be, like the preview, right? That's what we do for podcasts. So we get the word out about the podcast and get people to say, oh shit, that looks pretty interesting. Look, they have this amazing special guest. Let's go listen. So that's our side of it. We're not selling the ad space within the podcast. We are just promoting the actual podcast itself. You're getting the actual traffic to these podcasts.
Yes.
In some of these networks and vice versa.
Yeah.
So how are you doing it? What's the secret sauce, Joe?
Give
me the secret sauce. Where are you running ads now, bro?
We run them all over the internet.
How are you actually growing these?
Yeah. So we have an ad tech company. We have an ad agency, and we place the ads on thousands of websites. We target the specific audience. If you're looking for a specific demographic, we do our best to target as close to that demographic as possible and get as many people in there, widening it up a little bit and making sure that we're still getting enough eyeballs on this, and then really just targeting the right people to come in and download the podcast and listen to the podcast. So
kind of like Google ads, banner ads, that sort of
similar,
thing?
Yes,
or
exactly.
Okay. Is there a particular type of like demographic or psychographic that you really like to target, like when it comes to podcast listeners?
So the more general, the better, right? Like if somebody has a general audience, a comedy podcast, everybody wants to hear a comedy. Most people want to hear comedy podcasts. We tend to get some that are very niche businesses that want to advertise it, and they're like, we need this level with a certification and these types of people, and we're like, that's going to be a bit of a challenge. I don't know if we're going to be able to get that many people that are into OSHA certifications that really want to listen to podcasts, like an OSHA podcast. Fantastic. Like that one's a hard sell, but the general ones, the true crimes, the news, the comedy ones, like things that are typically a little more general, that's I think that has a bigger audience, and those are easier for us to place and do an amazing job with.
So Joe, I totally get what you're talking about when you say about being way too niche and having a more general type of podcast going to be easier to run ads for, right? To drive more traffic. Are there any particular niches that you really like? Any particular niche, any particular type? You mentioned like true crime, political, comedy. Is there anything that you're like, wow, this stuff is hot, I can run great ads to it? Any particular niche that you really like?
That's a good question. Not necessarily that I think that anything besides something that's really niche works well, right? We found there's a lot of people on the internet, apparently, right? And they all like different stuff. So it's, when we find interesting podcasts that are produced well, that sound good, they tend to get good traction.
Fair enough. I'm always looking for that hotness there. How much should we expect to pay, right? So that to me is a tough thing with running ads. Honestly, running ads is complicated. There's a million places you can be. It's tough. I think that we all think that we're Facebook ad gurus when we hit that boost post, but it just doesn't always pay off.
Yeah.
How much should we be expecting? What should be our budget when we look at actually growing our podcast with ads?
Sure. Oh, well, that's two separate questions, actually. So the first question is, how much should we expect to spend with us, is I think your first question. we charge 80 cents per download.
Okay.
So it's a fixed download thing. So that's what we charge for. We don't charge for setup fees and graphics and design. We make all the ads. We don't charge for that. We give them to you like an agency, and you can use them whatever you want afterwards, which is nice as well. We don't charge for any of that. We only charge for the download. So 75 billion impressions on the internet. We don't charge for that. We just charge for the performance. So that's what you can expect to pay us. As far as what one should budget, we actually turn down quite a bit of people because they don't have a game plan in mind. So sometimes it's an ego play. Like, yeah, I just want to see more downloads. Great. Well, just to make myself happy because that's my answer is I just want to see more downloads, right? And that's not necessarily good enough for everybody. I think that if you have a game plan in mind where you have an advertiser that wants to come on board and you want to show them that your podcast is growing and that they will get X thousand downloads per episode if you advertise on our podcast, that's what you can do. Or you are trying to join a network like, hey, we want to be in this network. They have a minimum threshold of, we have to have 5,000 downloads per episode or we can't really be in their network. And that's what I really want to do to take my podcast to the next level. So you'd advertise your podcast and that's where we would come in. So those are the types of the two main types of scenarios that we would work with.
So that's a really good point.
But it varies, right? But it varies. Like I wouldn't just. It varies on how much growth you want, right? So if you're at 50,000 downloads per episode, are you going to try to work and try to get 2,000 more, or are you going to try to get you're going to try to double that, right? If you're at 2,000, you're going to be like, all right, I need 50,000. Well, that's a significant bump, right? Like you have nothing to start with and you want 50,000 downloads an episode. What are you doing this for? So if you have a goal in mind as a business, right? You mentioned in the beginning, like this is for a business. If this is what you want to do to grow your brand, your business, and be an entrepreneur, you have to have that goal in mind. You have to have these things, in your planning when you're planning out, well, I'm spending money on advertising, I'm spending money on technology, I'm spending money on everything else. What's the goal?
Yeah.
So if you don't have that, a lot of people come and say, "Oh, can you grow it?" I'm like, "Well, we could, but I don't want to take your money. Yeah. I want you to have a plan in mind."
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, and I think the people, this is a funny conversation I get into with people. They're like, "I want to grow my podcast," but the real question should be why. Why? Because right. there's a whole business aspect to this thing. I really love the point where you say, I'm trying to land a sponsor, but in order to get the sponsor, I need, 5,000 downloads per episode or 10,000 per episode, right. Whatever that threshold is. Well, then I actually can come up with a feasible budget for how much I actually want to spend on running ads to the show. How much is going to, 80 cents. I know, okay, if I'm guaranteed to spend, $1,000, I'm going to get, I don't know, whatever that would be, 800 downloads.
Yeah, I can't do the math either. But it's something along those lines. Exactly. Like get Excel and then do the math after that, right? So you'll figure it out. But it shouldn't only be us, right? Like there's, like you mentioned earlier, there's social media, there's ads in other podcasts. There's lots of things that you can do. Go to sponsor an event or go to different conferences. And, there's definitely lots of things that you can do. And I think if you're going to advertise a podcast, if you're going to grow a podcast and take it seriously as a business, you should be considering all these different aspects, right? Go as a guest on other shows, right? Like, hey, I threw my own podcast a plug right in the beginning of your show, right? Friday Night Karaoke, right? I did that right in the beginning of the of my show, right? So get the word out there for your podcast on other shows that are doing well, and then interview other people. So there's a lot of things that you have to do to grow your podcast. There's not just one silver bullet that will all of a sudden be magical, right? So I think that's something that people need to remember. It's like any business, right? Like there has to be a full business approach to this, right? It can't just be, if you want it to be a hobby, great. You love hanging out and chatting with your buddies on doing a podcast once in a while. It's a hobby. Fantastic. Oh, I love it. And have a great time, have an amazing time. But if you're like, listen, I want this to be my business, I want this to be serious, you have to have a business mindset to it, right? The fun part is the talk for the half an hour or the hour, right? Then there's everything else that goes into it that makes it an actual business. The advertising, the marketing, the budgeting, the finance, everything, right? So if you're going to run it as a business, you have to keep those things in mind.
Yeah, and I think that for me, I started off podcasting with no broadcast experience. It's just it's kind of like a new phenomenon. Historically, you're the talent. You don't need to worry about all the other business side of it, right? The entire radio station or news station, TV station, right. They handle that. You just show up and smile and do the fun stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's businesses out there that will handle that back end stuff for you, right? Like, I'm not saying that you have to all of a sudden know all of this stuff, right? You should be able to find people to do some of these things for you. Like, there's companies who will edit the podcast for you, for instance, right? Like, you give them the raw files, they'll edit it down, they'll take out all the what was I going to say? Yeah, let's edit that out, right? Like, they'll edit that out, right? So, like, you can tell them to do this stuff, and they will edit out, they'll clean it up, they'll normalize the audio, right? And then they'll give you a nice, beautiful packaged podcast. There's people who will get hosts for you. I'm sorry, get book guests for you. There's people who will produce the thing from end to end, right? I'll get you online. All you do is just show up, right? You're the celeb. Just show up. I'll take care of the entire back end and the recording of the podcast. There's lots of different, like the advertising. You don't have to go out and start doing all the phone calls yourself, right? Once you get to a certain point, like, you can get advertising inserted. There's host read ads. There's inserted ads. There's larger scale things where you can actually become part of a network where they'll sell the ads for you. So there's lots of different things out there. Like, you don't have to feel like you should have to do every single aspect and be an expert at every single thing yourself, but you should have an idea of how they work and what they do, so you know what you're getting into and what you are. You want to bring in a team to do this, great, but you should at least know what it is, right? Like, you should know how to do it, right? It's your company, it's your podcast, your business. Yeah,
you're kind of like the CEO. Like, you can't be the everything. You can't be the CMO and the CFO and the COO, right?
Right.
But I agree, and I think that's part of the fun of podcasting, is being able to build out a whole infrastructure.
Agreed.
And I really like the idea of advertising. It's something that's kind of been getting on my radar as I start to, over the past year, 2, 3 years. It's like there is like real money going on in podcasting, and I don't see it going anywhere. As people say, I don't want to turn on, the TV. I want to listen to my guy or my girl on her podcast. Give me the news or give me the jokes, right? I just see it growing. It just seems like this huge bubble of cash that's starting to influx into this industry.
It is. It's like you said, it's not going anywhere. In fact, it's growing like crazy. There's a good newsletter sounds profitable. Brian Berletta. He talks about exactly this all the time, about it, like, that's his bag. Like I mentioned, our side is the growth side. Like, his side is the advertising side, and he just lives it and breathes it. That is a good one. If you are looking to really understand the industry of advertising within a podcast, that's a good one for you to read. And he's got a podcast too, coincidentally, right? So it's really good, and he's really insightful. And if you want to learn exactly the different techniques and the formats and what's going on and how these things are evolving and the money that's going into it, that's definitely a good one to follow.
Awesome. So, Joe, before we get to the rapid fire, I do want to ask if someone wants to go to the next level, because they're kind of like on the fence. Maybe I should run ads. Maybe I shouldn't. What's the best way for people to get in touch with Joe and Mowpod?
Yeah, mowpod.com, MOWPOD.com. And there's a contact us form right there. Hit us up. We'll chat it up with you. One of the things that we love doing is, even if we don't work with you, we're always happy to give advice. We're always happy to point you in the right direction. We've spent tons of hours, probably too many hours, with people that are not customers on the sales side. And we're like, listen, we know this person's not going to be a customer, but they seem nice, and let's just give them some advice, let's just help out, right? And we do this all the time. So you definitely hit us up. We love chatting podcasts. We love talking about it. It's a fun industry. We got into it. We went into it hard, and we're really enjoying it. So we love talking all things podcasts. We go to the events. Like you mentioned in the beginning, we went to Podfest. That's where we met. We love that event. We sponsor that event. It's such a fun industry with some amazing people. So definitely hit us up. We'd love to chat about your podcast.
And I can tell that you're not super salesy. I like that you can say, well, you should be running ads, but you can also do this and this and this and bring it all together. So I really appreciate you extending that offer, everyone. Mowpod.com, link below. Check it out.
Mm-hmm. And before I do this, and the reason that I'm not salesy is, one, I know I have a good product, but two, I've spent the last 20 years as an entrepreneur, as an investor. I run a fund in New York. I've invested in tons of companies and helped entrepreneurs get started. So I love the entire aspect of this. This is a sort of a subset of just being an entrepreneur, which I have spent just years and years in. And I love seeing entrepreneurs that are eager to learn, improve their lives, improve their business. I don't want to say improve your life. It's a fucking rocky road, but it is the reward for, if you do it right and you do an amazing job, is amazing. It is amazing. And I've seen some fantastic success stories over the years, and I just love being in that space. So yeah, definitely always happy to chat about it.
To your point, entrepreneurship definitely has some rocky road to it, but I don't think being an employee for 30, 40 years doesn't. I think that in some cases that could be even rockier. I mean, you know, your bosses, like your boss tells you what to do. You never get time off. Like, you know, and especially in this world, that's why I think it's really important that we all become after hours entrepreneurs, that we're building these different businesses, because technology is changing. And you know, if you're not evolving with it, if you're not building something, like you could be 45, 50 being replaced by the 18-year-old because you don't know how to like use the new widget, or you don't understand TikTok or whatever. Yeah.
And you will be replaced. It is you're 100% on, you know, but either by the 18, well, maybe not the 18-year-old, but like the 22-year-old, right? Or the automated robot, right? Like the automation. Well, I was doing this whole thing and I was putting together this entire thing, and now like you press a button and like there goes my job, right? So there's definitely, you know, a need to either be with the latest thing, but yeah, like you said, having a job doesn't mean you're 100% secure, right? It's not instant security, right? So you could be out of your job tomorrow, right? So yes, entrepreneurship is a rocky road, but so is everything else.
Yeah. I could really go deep on how passionate I am about it, because I feel really concerned for a lot of people that are just like, I'm just going to wake up, I'm going to go to my 9 to 5, and then one day the rug's going to get pulled out from under them. Yeah. It's a scary thing. But, you know, on that note, I will also say that for me, at least, podcasting has opened up a lot of opportunities that I just never would have guessed, you know? So for anyone out there, if you've been thinking about opening up a new business, you're trying to learn a new skill, I was not a podcaster 5 years ago. Like, this is something that, you know, you get into it, you learn, and I got an NFT show, I've got a dad show, I've got the After Hours Entrepreneur. So anyway,
nice. Well, that's awesome.
Well met. Buddy.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. What'd you say about rapid fire?
Rapid fire. Get ready. Buckle up, Buttercup. Okay. We're going deep. It's going to be intense. Joe, what's the scariest movie you've ever seen?
Scariest movie I've ever seen? Jaws. Because I was like 5 or something, you know, and it has left an impression on me for the last 40 years. Like every time I go into the ocean, I'm like, fuck, I hear it down. I hear it in my head, right? I just can't. I go into the ocean. I do it. I go into the ocean. I've tried surfing. I love the water. I love the beach. I love it, but it scares me. That movie fucking killed me. Yeah,
it's terrifying because it's real. And you know, as someone who's scuba dived, you know, it's the second you drop into the open ocean, it's like, it is. Yeah, I'm with you there. Favorite place to go on a vacation?
Favorite place to go on a vacation? Whew. Someplace by the beach. Sorry, it is. I love
There's
going down there.
Over here.
I know I got problems. But yeah, I mean, you know, like Block Island is beautiful. I love it. It's so nice. It's so beautiful. And in the winter, we do a lot of snowboarding and skiing. So we're up in Vermont all the time, hitting the mountains. So those are my happy places.
NFTs, overrated or underrated?
Ooh, that's a very good question. I own some on the basketball side and the horse side. And, I've been dabbling in it a little bit. It is, I think, overhyped on the ridiculous applications that have come so far, but it is underrated on the future potential of it. I think once it becomes more mainstream, like right now it's like, oh, look, Bored Apes, oh my God, like who gives a shit? But like the back end of it where they're like, okay, now let's put a practical use to it, like owning digital rights to music, and that music goes into a movie and you own part of it, right? And you get a royalty on it because that movie was a hit. Like that sort of stuff is the next evolution, where it becomes more serious and it's not just like, you know, greater fool sort of stuff. Like, I bought this, I don't even know what it is. Some kids, dude's 5-year-old painted it, right, and like sold it, and hopefully someone will buy it for a little more than me. Like, it's garbage. It's garbage art. Like, and I'm like, but I just sold it for like $30,000, right? Like, it's insane. So once it becomes more mainstream of the actual practical applications, I think it'll just be amazing.
I 1,000% agree with that. And for all you math people out there say there's no such thing as 1,000%, I don't care. 1,000%. I agree with
true.
That.
It is. No, there is such thing as 1,000%.
Is there? I said 110% one time, and guy goes, "Hey, can't. 100% is the highest. You can't be more than 110%."
No, anyway. That's bullshit. That's bullshit. Because if you buy an NFT for like $30 and you sell it for $30,000, you made like what, 1,000%, right?
That's true.
Okay, so there we are.
That's true, Doug, Joe just proved you wrong. All right, yeah. Joe, you're on an airplane. Mm-hmm. You're sitting down. Who would you want to sit down next to? You could sit down next to anyone.
Who do I want to sit down next to? Is like anyone. Like all of a sudden, like I sit down and like celebrity, not living or dead sort of thing. Like actual celebrity, like right now that could potentially be on an airplane.
Yeah, you're gonna sit down first class, of course. Who you sitting down next to?
That's a good one. I would say, oh man, Dave Grohl. Ooh. Foo Fighters.
Yeah.
He's fucking awesome. I've always wanted to meet him, and he looks just fucking awesome. And he looks like he would be like a fun person to annoy until he puts his headphones on and says, "Leave me the fuck alone," right? And like, yeah. So Dave Grohl.
Good answer. Good answer.
Thanks.
Joe, if you had 10 seconds with yourself 10 years ago,
buy Bitcoin, and then I'd sit down and do nothing for the other 8 seconds.
Joe said it, and I agree with it. Joe, thanks for the insights, brother.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Boom. Thanks for listening to the show today. If you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button. There's more fresh content coming right at you. So get ready, get prepared. And in the meantime, go take action. I'm calling you to action. Go take it. See you next time on the show. Peace.